The voice came from the shadows when Chaska Fireheart thought he was alone. A child's whisper, barely louder than the wind through the pines, asking a question that would unravel everything he'd built in 8 years of solitude. Chaska had been skinning the elk he'd taken down that morning, his hands steady and practiced as he worked the blade along the hide. The November air in the eastern Sierra Nevada was sharp enough to sting, and the sun was already sinking behind the granite peaks, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold. His hunting cabin sat in a narrow valley, miles from the nearest settlement, surrounded by pine forests so thick a man could disappear into it and never be found. The isolation was exactly what Chaska wanted. After 8 years of living alone in the high country, he'd grown accustomed to the silence, to the rhythm of the seasons, to a life that required nothing from him except survival. He heard the sound first. A soft scraping, like a boot dragging across stone. Chaska's hand moved to the knife at his belt, his body going still. 8 years of living alone in the high country had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now those instincts were screaming that something was wrong. He set down the skinning knife and rose slowly, his eyes scanning the tree line. The forest was dark now, the shadows growing long and deep between the pines. A raven called from somewhere overhead, its voice harsh and mocking. Then he saw them. 3 shapes emerging from the tree line, small and hunched against the cold. Children, 2 boys and a girl, their clothes torn and filthy, their faces pale with exhaustion. The oldest boy, maybe 9 or 10, stood in front of the others like a shield, his jaw set with a determination that seemed too heavy for someone so young. His shirt was too thin for the mountain cold, his trousers torn at the knees, his feet wrapped in cloth that had once been socks but now hung in tatters. Chaska straightened slowly, wiping his hands on his leather trousers. He studied the children in silence, his dark eyes taking in every detail. The girl was shivering violently, her arms wrapped around herself, her lips tinged blue. The smallest boy, no more than 4 or 5, stood behind her with his hand clutching the back of her dress, his eyes wide and vacant, staring at nothing. And the oldest boy, the one who'd stepped forward first, was watching Chaska with a mixture of fear and desperate hope, like a man standing at the edge of a cliff trying to decide whether to jump. "Sir," the boy said, his voice cracking, "can we rest here tonight? Just till morning. We won't cause trouble. We won't eat much. We'll leave at first light, I promise." Chaska didn't answer right away. He looked past them, scanning the forest, the ridge line, the valley below. No horses, no wagon. No adults, just 3 children standing in the fading light, like they'd walked out of a nightmare. The nearest road was 5 miles south, and beyond that, nothing but wilderness for 20 miles in every direction. "Where'd you come from?" Chaska asked. His voice was low and rough from disuse. He spoke English clearly, though his Paiute accent shaped the words differently than the white settlers down in the valley towns. He rarely spoke to anyone anymore, hadn't seen another human being in nearly 3 months. The boy hesitated. "The road. We've been walking since yesterday morning." "Walking from where?" The boy's eyes dropped to the ground. "A place we couldn't stay." Chaska's jaw tightened. He'd seen this before, years ago when he'd worked as a tracker for the territorial marshal down in Carson City. Runaway children, usually from orphanages or workhouses, sometimes from families that didn't want them. They never lasted long in the wilderness. The cold took them, or the hunger, or the animals that hunted at night. He'd found 3 children frozen to death one winter, huddled together under a pine tree, their arms wrapped around each other. That was the year before he quit. "Where are your people?" Chaska asked. "We don't have any," the boy said quietly. "Everyone has people, not us." "Not anymore." The girl made a small sound, somewhere between a whimper and a cough. Her whole body shook with it, and she pressed her hand to her mouth, trying to stifle it. Chaska looked at her properly for the first time. Her lips were blue, her body trembling so hard her teeth chattered. She wore a dress that might have been brown once, but was now so covered in dirt and mud it was nearly black. Her feet were bare, the soles cut and bleeding. The smallest boy, the one clinging to her dress, hadn't made a sound. He just stared at Chaska with eyes that had seen too much, eyes that didn't belong on a child's face. Chaska had spent 8 years avoiding this exact situation. After leaving his work with the marshal, after walking away from the Paiute settlement where he'd been born, after losing everything that mattered, he'd built a life that didn't include other people. No complications, no attachments, no one to lose. He'd chosen this valley specifically because it was too remote, too harsh, too unforgiving for anyone to follow him. He trapped in winter, hunted in summer, and spoke to no one. It was a good life. A simple life. A life that didn't break his heart every time he closed his eyes, but he looked at those 3 children standing in the gathering darkness, and he thought about what would happen if he sent them away. They'd walk until they couldn't walk anymore. They'd freeze when the temperature dropped after sunset. Or they'd stumble into a bear den, or fall into a ravine, or simply lie down and not get up again. And he'd wake up tomorrow knowing he could have stopped it. Inside, Chaska said. The oldest boy's face transformed. Relief, gratitude, and disbelief all flashed across his features in the space of a heartbeat. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. You won't regret this, I promise. We'll be quiet, we won't touch anything, we'll— Chaska held up a hand. Just till morning. Then we figure out where you belong. The boy nodded quickly, too quickly. Yes, sir. Just till morning, Chaska gestured toward the cabin. The children moved as a unit, the oldest boy guiding the girl holding the smallest boy's hand. They climbed the 3 wooden steps to the porch and stopped at the door, waiting for permission. Even in their exhaustion, even in their desperation, they'd been trained to wait, to ask, to never assume they were welcome. Chaska pushed past them and opened the door. The cabin was simple. 1 main room with a stone fireplace that he'd built himself from river rock, a rough-hewn table he'd carved from pine, 2 chairs, and a sleeping platform built against the far wall. Shelves lined 1 wall, holding supplies, tools, and the few possessions Chaska had accumulated over 8 years. Deer and elk hides hung from the rafters, and the smell of wood smoke and cured meat filled the air. It wasn't much, but it was his, and until tonight, no one else had ever stepped inside. The children stepped inside and stopped just past the threshold, their eyes adjusting to the dim interior. They stood perfectly still, their bodies tense, like animals ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. Chaska struck a match and lit the oil lamp on the table, then moved to the fireplace where coals from the morning still glowed faintly. He added kindling, blew on the embers, and watched the flames catch and spread. The fire cast dancing shadows across the walls, and slowly the room began to warm. Sit, he said, pointing to the rug in front of the hearth. The children sank down immediately, huddling together. The girl pulled the smallest boy into her lap, wrapping her arms around him, and began rocking him gently. The oldest boy sat beside them, his back straight, his hands pressed between his knees. None of them spoke. They just stared at the fire like they'd forgotten what warmth felt like. Chaska went to the shelves and pulled down a tin pot, filled it with water from the barrel by the door, and set it on the iron hook above the fire. While the water heated, he sliced venison from the haunch hanging near the shelves, laid the strips on a wooden plate, and added some dried berries, a piece of cornbread left from breakfast, and a small wedge of hard cheese he'd traded for last month. It wasn't a feast, but it was more than these children had probably seen in days. He brought the food to the children and set it on the floor in front of them. They stared at it like it might disappear if they blinked. The oldest boy reached out slowly, his hand trembling, picked up a strip of meat, and handed it to the girl. She tore it in half and gave part to the smallest boy before taking a bite herself. Only then did the oldest boy take some for himself. He ate slowly, carefully, like someone who'd learned the hard way that food might be taken away at any moment. Chaska watched this exchange in silence. He'd seen loyalty before, seen children protect each other in ways that would shame most adults. But there was something about the way these three moved together. The way they prioritized each other without question. The way they formed a unit that couldn't be broken, that struck something deep in his chest. It reminded him of his own siblings, back before the fever took them. Back when family meant something more than ghosts and memories. When the water began to steam, Chaska poured it into 3 tin cups and brought them over. The children wrapped their hands around the cups, holding them close, letting the warmth seep into their frozen fingers. The girl's hands were so cold they were nearly white, and when she lifted the cup to her lips, her hands shook so badly water sloshed over the rim. "What's your name?" Chaska asked the oldest boy. The boy looked up. "Adam." "Adam what?" "Just Adam." Chaska nodded toward the others. "And them?" "This is Kate," Adam said, gesturing to the girl. "And that's Max. How old?" "I'm 10. "Kate's 7. "Max is 4. "You've been walking since yesterday morning." Adam nodded. "Walking from where?" Adam's eyes dropped to the cup in his hands. "A town, 2 days south." "What town?" "I don't know the name." "Just a town." Chaska studied the boy's face. Adam was lying, or at least not telling the whole truth. His eyes wouldn't meet Chaska's, and his jaw was set in the same stubborn line Chaska had seen on cornered animals. But pushing too hard too fast would only make him shut down completely. Children who'd been hurt learned quickly how to build walls, and those walls didn't come down easily. "You got family anywhere?" Chaska asked. Adam shook his head. "Friends?" "Someone looking for you." Another shake. Chaska leaned back against the wall, his arms crossed. "Tomorrow morning, we go to town. There's a settlement half a day's ride from here. They'll know what to do with you." Adam's face went pale. The cup slipped in his hands, and he caught it just before it fell. "Please, sir, don't take us to town." "Why not?" "Because they'll send us back." "Back where?" Adam's voice dropped to a whisper. "To the place we ran from." The words hung in the air like smoke. Kate's arms tightened around Max, and the little boy buried his face in her shoulder. Chaska's jaw clenched. He'd heard stories about the orphanages and work farms that took in unwanted children. Places that promised care and education but delivered beatings and starvation instead. Places where children were worked until their hands bled and their backs broke. He'd seen the results more than once during his years with the marshal, had tracked down runaways who bore scars that would never fully heal. "Show me," Chaska said quietly. Adam hesitated. His eyes flicked to his siblings, then back to Chaska. Slowly, reluctantly, he pushed up the sleeve of his torn shirt. His forearm was covered in bruises. Old ones faded to yellow and green, newer ones still dark purple and black. Some were shaped like fingers. Others were long and thin, the kind left by switches or belts. There were burns too, small circular marks that could only have come from cigarettes or hot coals. Chaska's blood went cold. He looked at Kate, at the way she held Max so carefully, her body curved around his like armor. He looked at Max, at his vacant stare, at the way he hadn't spoken a single word since arriving. The boy's eyes were wrong, empty, like someone had reached inside and scooped out everything that made him a child. "They hit all of you," Chaska said. It wasn't a question. Adam nodded. "Every day. If we worked too slow, if we talked back, if we cried." "And Max," his voice broke. "Max used to talk all the time. He was always singing, always laughing. He'd tell stories, make up games. But 3 months ago, he just stopped. Just woke up one morning and wouldn't say a word. And when they realized he wasn't going to answer them anymore, they locked him in the coal cellar for 4 days. No light. No food. Just darkness. Chaska's hands curled into fists. He looked at the small boy, at his hollow eyes and silent mouth, and felt something dark and furious rise in his chest. He'd seen men broken by cruelty before, had watched soldiers come back from war with that same empty stare. He'd never seen it done to a child. Never seen someone so young have their voice stolen, their spirit crushed, their light extinguished. "So you ran," Chaska said. "A week ago," Adam confirmed. "We waited until the night guard fell asleep, then we climbed out through the kitchen window. We've been walking ever since, staying off the roads during the day, moving at night. We didn't know where we were going. We just knew we had to get away. We knew if we stayed, something worse would happen. Something we couldn't come back from, and if I take you to town tomorrow, they'll send you back." "Yes, sir. The institution has papers. Legal papers that say we belong to them until we're old enough to work for wages. Every town we'd go to, they'd just contact the institution and send us back. They always do. No one ever questions it. No one ever asks if we want to go back." Chaska was quiet for a long moment. He stared into the fire, watching the flames dance and twist. He thought about the life he'd built here, the solitude he'd fought for, the peace he'd finally found after years of violence and loss. 3 children would shatter all of that. 3 children would bring questions, complications, danger. 3 children would force him to care again, to feel again, to risk everything he'd spent 8 years protecting. But he looked at Adam's bruised arms, at Kate's protective grip on Max, at the way they huddled together like it was the only safety they'd ever known, and he couldn't send them back. He couldn't be the man who delivered 3 broken children back to the people who'd broken them. He'd failed too many people in his life, had turned away too many times when he should have stood firm. He wouldn't do it again. "You can stay till morning," Chaska said finally. "But we need to talk about what happens after that." "I know we can't stay forever," Adam said quickly. "I know we're asking too much. But if you could just let us rest tonight, get warm, maybe have some food. We'll leave at first light, and we won't tell anyone we were here. We'll disappear. You'll never see us again. Where will you go?" Adam's face crumpled just slightly before he pulled it back together. "I don't know. North, maybe. Somewhere far enough away that they won't find us. Somewhere we can hide until I'm old enough to work, old enough to take care of Kate and Max myself. You'll freeze before you get anywhere. Winter's coming. 2 weeks, maybe 3, and this whole valley will be buried in snow." "I know," Adam whispered. "But at least we'll be together. At least they won't split us up. At least we'll die free." The words hit Chaska like a fist to the chest. He'd heard men talk like that before, men who'd lost everything and decided death was better than surrender. He'd never heard it from a 10-year-old boy. Chaska stood and walked to the shelves, pulling down 3 wool blankets. He brought them back and handed them to the children. "Sleep," he said. "We'll figure out the rest in the morning." Adam's eyes filled with tears, but he blinked them back. "Thank you, sir. For everything. For not turning us away. For giving us this one night." Chaska nodded and turned away. He couldn't look at the gratitude in the boy's eyes, couldn't bear the weight of it. He sat down in the chair by the fire, his rifle across his lap, and watched as the 3 children wrapped themselves in the blankets and curled up together on the rug. Within minutes, exhaustion claimed them. Their breathing slowed and deepened, and they slept. But even in sleep, they didn't let go of each other. Kate's arms stayed wrapped around Max, and Adam's hand rested on his sister's shoulder, protective even in unconsciousness. But Chaska didn't sleep. He sat there through the night, feeding the fire, listening to the wind howl outside, and thinking about the choice he'd already made without fully realizing it. These children had knocked on his door asking for one night of safety, and somehow, in the space of a few hours, they'd already become his responsibility. He'd felt it the moment he saw them, The moment he looked into Adam's desperate eyes and knew he couldn't turn them away, he thought about the men who would come looking for them. The institution wouldn't let 3 children disappear without a search. They'd send people, maybe lawmen, maybe bounty hunters, maybe men with legal papers and guns who wouldn't take no for an answer. And when those men arrived, Chaska would have to decide whether to stand his ground or step aside, whether to fight or surrender, whether to risk everything for 3 children he'd known for less than a day. Outside, the temperature dropped. Frost formed on the windows, and the wind picked up, rattling the shutters and howling through the pines like wolves circling prey. Chaska added more wood to the fire and pulled his coat tighter. The children slept on, their faces peaceful for the first time since they'd arrived. In sleep, they looked younger, more fragile. In sleep, Max's face lost some of its terrible emptiness. And Kate stopped shivering, and Adam's jaw unclenched. By the time the first pale light of dawn began to seep through the window, Chaska Fireheart had made his decision. He just wasn't sure yet whether it would save these children or destroy them all. The morning came cold and gray, with fog rolling through the valley like spilled milk. Chaska had been awake for hours, watching the children sleep, listening to the forest wake around them. Birds called from the pines. A deer moved through the clearing behind the cabin, and somewhere in the distance, a mountain lion screamed. The children didn't stir. They slept like the dead, their bodies finally surrendering to exhaustion that had been building for days. Chaska stood and moved quietly to the stove, building up the fire and setting a pot of water to boil. He mixed cornmeal with water and salt, making a thick porridge, then added dried apples and a spoonful of honey. The smell filled the cabin, warm and sweet, and one by one, the children began to wake. Max opened his eyes first, blinking at the unfamiliar ceiling. For a moment, his face showed nothing, then slowly, recognition dawned. He looked at Chaska, then at the fire, then at his sister still sleeping beside him. He didn't move, didn't make a sound. Just lay there watching. Kate woke next, her body tensing immediately. Her arms tightened around Max before her eyes were fully open, and she sat up quickly, scanning the room like she expected danger. When she saw Chaska at the stove, her shoulders relaxed slightly, but the wariness never left her face. Adam was last. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes, then froze when he remembered where he was. He looked at Chaska, then at the window where pale morning light filtered through. His face fell. Morning had come. Their time was up. Eat first, Chaska said, ladling the porridge into wooden bowls. Then we talk. The children moved to the table, their movements stiff and cautious. They sat in a row on one side, leaving Chaska the chair at the head. He set the bowls in front of them and handed them spoons. They ate in silence, their eyes downcast, their movements mechanical. Adam ate the slowest, like every bite was an effort, like his throat was too tight to swallow. When they finished, Chaska cleared the bowls and sat down across from them. He folded his hands on the table and studied each child in turn. In the daylight, he could see details he'd missed the night before. Kate had a scar running from her left ear to her jaw, thin and white with age. Max's wrists were ringed with marks that looked like rope burns. And Adam's knuckles were split and scabbed, the kind of wounds that came from fighting. "Tell me about the institution," Chaska said. Adam's jaw tightened. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. Where it is. Who runs it. How many children. How you got there." Adam looked at his siblings, then back at Chaska. "It's called the Mercy Ridge Industrial School. It's about 40 miles south of here, just outside a town called Silverton. A man named Edgar Voss runs it. He tells everyone it's a charitable institution, that he's saving orphans and teaching them trades. But it's not like that. What's it like?" Adam's voice dropped. "It's a work camp. There are maybe 30 children there, all between 4 and 14. We work from sunrise to sunset. The older boys work in the timber mill. The older girls work in the laundry and kitchen. The younger ones pick rocks from the fields or sort scrap metal. If you work fast and keep quiet, you get 1 meal a day. If you don't, you get nothing. And if you complain, if you cry, if you try to run, Mr. Voss locks you in the cellar. Kate's hand crept across the table and gripped Adam's. He squeezed back, his knuckles white. How long were you there? Chaska asked. 8 months, Adam said. Our parents died of typhoid last spring. We didn't have any other family, so the county sent us to Mercy Ridge. They told us it was temporary, that someone would come for us eventually. But no one ever came. And after a while, we realized no one was coming, so you planned an escape, Adam nodded. For 2 months. I watched the guards, learned their routines, figured out when they were most likely to fall asleep. I stole food from the kitchen, a little at a time, and hid it under my mattress. I took a map from Mr. Voss's office when he wasn't looking. And when everything was ready, we went, in the middle of the night, 3 hours past midnight. The guard had been drinking. I could smell it on him. We climbed out the kitchen window and ran for the tree line. I thought someone would hear us, thought the dogs would start barking, but they didn't. We just ran and ran until we couldn't run anymore. And you've been walking ever since? Yes, sir. We followed the map north, stayed off the main roads, hid during the day. We ate berries and drank from streams. Kate found a rabbit caught in a snare 2 days ago, and we cooked it over a fire. But mostly we just walked. Chaska leaned back in his chair. They'll be looking for you. Voss won't let 3 children disappear without a search. I know, Adam said quietly. That's why we kept moving. That's why we didn't stop anywhere. But Kate was getting sick, and Max couldn't walk anymore, and I didn't know what else to do. When I saw your cabin last night, I thought maybe we could rest for a few hours, get warm, then keep going. Going where? Adam's face crumpled. I don't know. Canada, maybe. Somewhere far enough that they can't find us. Somewhere we can disappear. Canada's 500 miles north through mountain passes that'll be snowed in within a month. You'd never make it. Then we'll go east. Or west, it doesn't matter. We just can't stay here, and we can't go back. Chaska was quiet for a long moment. He looked at the 3 children sitting across from him, at their hollow eyes and thin faces, at the way they clung to each other like shipwreck survivors clinging to driftwood. He thought about his own life, about the choices he'd made, the people he'd failed. He thought about the 8 years he'd spent hiding in these mountains, running from ghosts he couldn't outpace. There's another option, Chaska said finally. Adam looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. What option? You stay here. With me. Until we figure something out. The room went silent. Adam stared at Chaska like he didn't understand the words. Kate's grip on her brother's hand tightened, and Max's empty eyes shifted to focus on Chaska's face. Stay here? Adam repeated. With you, for now. Until it's safe. Until we find a way to make sure you don't go back to that place. But you don't even know us. I know enough. They'll come looking for us. They'll find us here. Let them come, Chaska said. His voice was flat, matter-of-fact. I'll deal with it. Adam shook his head. You don't understand. Mr. Voss has connections. He knows judges, sheriffs, territorial officials. He has legal papers that say we belong to the institution. If he finds out we're here, he'll bring the law with him, and you'll be arrested for harboring runaways. I've been arrested before. Didn't take. This is different. This is serious. You could lose everything. Chaska leaned forward, his dark eyes locked on Adam's. I lost everything worth losing a long time ago. What I have left doesn't matter. It matters to us, Adam said, his voice breaking. You're the first person who's been kind to us in months. The first person who didn't look at us like we were problems to be solved. We can't let you get hurt because of us. That's not your choice to make. Yes, it is. We're the ones who ran. We're the ones who brought trouble to your door. We won't let you pay for our mistakes." Chaska stood and walked to the window. Outside, the fog was lifting, revealing the valley in all its stark beauty. The pine stood dark and silent, the creek ran silver between the rocks, and the mountains rose in the distance like ancient sentinels. He'd chosen this place because it was remote, because no one would follow him here, because he could finally be alone with his failures and his grief. But looking at those 3 children, at the desperation in their eyes and the love they had for each other, Chaska realized something he'd been denying for 8 years. Isolation wasn't peace. It was just another kind of death.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you.
And maybe, just maybe, these children had given him something he'd thought he'd lost forever. A reason to care. A reason to fight. A reason to be something more than a ghost haunting his own life. "When I was younger," Chaska said, still facing the window, "I had a family. A mother, a father, 2 brothers, a sister. We lived in a Paiute village near Walker Lake. It was a good life, simple, full of laughter and stories. But then the fever came. Scarlet fever. It swept through the village like wildfire. Within 2 weeks, my mother and sister were dead. My younger brother followed a month later. My father lasted another year before his heart just gave out. And my older brother, he left. Went to work for the railroad and never came back." Adam's voice was soft. "I'm sorry," Chaska turned to face them. "After they died, I didn't know what to do. I was 18, alone, angry at the world. So I became a tracker for the territorial marshal. I thought if I could help find criminals, if I could help bring justice to people who'd been wronged, maybe it would fill the hole inside me. Maybe it would make sense of the loss. Did it?" Adam asked. "No. I spent 5 years tracking killers and thieves through every corner of Nevada and California. I was good at it. The best they had. But every person I caught, every criminal I brought in, it didn't change anything. My family was still dead. The hole was still there. So I quit. Walked away from the badge and came here. Thought maybe if I was alone long enough, the pain would fade. Did it?" Adam asked again. Chaska met his eyes. "No, it just got quieter." "But quiet isn't the same as healed." Kate spoke for the first time, her voice small and clear. "Why are you telling us this? Because I don't want you to make the same mistake I did. Running doesn't fix anything. Hiding doesn't make the pain go away. All it does is make you smaller, makes your world smaller, until there's nothing left but ghosts and regrets." Adam's eyes filled with tears. "But we don't have a choice. If we stay anywhere, they'll find us. And when they do, they'll take us back. And it'll be worse. So much worse. Mr. Voss doesn't forget. He doesn't forgive. Then we make sure he can't take you back. How?" Adam's voice rose. "How do we do that? He has the law on his side. He has money and power and connections. We have nothing." Chaska walked back to the table and sat down. "We have the truth. And we have me. And that might just be enough." Kate's voice trembled. "What if it's not? Then we'll figure something else out. But I'm not letting you walk back into that wilderness to die. And I'm not letting anyone take you back to a place that breaks children for profit." Max, who hadn't spoken a word since arriving, suddenly reached across the table and placed his small hand on top of Chaska's. It was the lightest touch. Barely there, but it carried the weight of every unspoken word the boy had held inside for months. Chaska looked down at that small hand, at the rope scars around the wrist, at the dirt under the fingernails, and felt something crack open in his chest. "All right," Adam said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "We'll stay. But only until you change your mind. Only until you realize we're more trouble than we're worth." "I won't change my mind. You say that now. I mean it. I don't say things I don't mean. Adam wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. What do we do first? Chaska stood. First, we get you cleaned up. There's a creek out back with a deep pool. The water's cold, but it's clean. You need to wash, all of you. Then we'll see about getting you proper clothes. After that, I'll teach you how things work around here. How to chop wood, how to carry water, how to help with the hunting and trapping. If you're staying, you'll need to pull your weight. We can do that, Adam said quickly. We're good workers. We won't disappoint you. I'm not worried about disappointment. I'm worried about keeping you alive. Winter's coming, and these mountains don't forgive mistakes. You'll need to learn fast and listen close. Understood. All three children nodded. Even Max, who still hadn't spoken, nodded solemnly. Good. Now go wash up. I'll find you some clothes. The children stood and headed for the door. Adim paused at the threshold and looked back. Mr. Fireheart, just Chaska. Thank you. For everything. For not giving up on us. Chaska nodded once. Go on, and stay within sight of the cabin. These woods aren't safe for children who don't know them. When they were gone, Chaska sat back down at the table and put his head in his hands. What had he done? What had he committed himself to? 3 children. 3 broken, traumatized children who would need more than food and shelter. They'd need protection, healing, hope. Things Chaska wasn't sure he had left to give, but he thought about Max's hand on his, about the trust in that simple gesture, and knew he couldn't turn back now. These children had asked for one night of safety, and somehow, without planning it, without thinking it through, Chaska had promised them a future. Outside, he heard laughter. Light and tentative, but real. He walked to the window and looked out. Kate was standing in the creek, her dress hiked up to her knees. Splashing water at Adam, Max sat on the bank, his feet in the water, watching them with something that might have been the ghost of a smile. Chaska watched them for a long moment, then turned away and began pulling clothes from his storage chest. He had work to do. Children to protect. A promise to keep. And somewhere to the south, he knew, men were already saddling horses and loading guns, preparing to come for what they believed was theirs. Let them come, Chaska thought. Let them try. He'd faced worse odds before. And this time, he had something worth fighting for. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of activity. Chaska found clothes that would work for the children. His own shirts, too large but serviceable when belted. Extra wool socks. A coat that had belonged to his younger brother, carefully preserved in cedar and camphor. The children dressed quickly, efficiently, like soldiers preparing for inspection. After they'd eaten again, Chaska took them outside and began teaching them the rhythms of mountain life. He showed Adam how to split wood properly, how to read the grain and place the wedge. He taught Kate how to identify edible plants and which berries were safe. And he gave Max the simple task of collecting kindling, showing him what size sticks to look for, praising him when he got it right. Max didn't speak, but he listened. His eyes tracked every movement Chaska made, absorbing information like parched ground absorbing rain. And slowly, gradually, some of the emptiness in his face began to fill with something else. Curiosity, maybe. Or purpose. By midday, they'd established a routine. The children worked without complaint, moving with the practiced efficiency of people who'd learned that laziness brought punishment. But Chaska noticed something else too. They smiled more. They stood straighter. And when Kate laughed at something Adam said, it was a real laugh, full and genuine, not the hollow performance of someone pretending to be happy. They were eating lunch when Chaska heard it. The sound of horses, still distant, but growing closer. His hand moved instinctively to the rifle leaning against the wall. The children froze, their faces going pale. Inside, Chaska said quietly. Now, they obeyed instantly, scrambling through the door. Chaska followed, closing it behind them. He moved to the window and peered out through the gap in the shutters. 2 riders emerged from the tree line, moving slowly up the valley. They wore dark coats and wide-brimmed hats, and even from this distance, Chaska could see the hard set of their shoulders, the way they scanned the terrain like men hunting prey. "They found us," Adam whispered, his voice tight with terror. "They found us already," Chaska's jaw clenched. "Stay quiet. Stay hidden. No matter what happens, don't come out until I tell you." "What are you going to do?" Chaska picked up his rifle and checked the load. "Whatever I have to." The riders stopped 50 yards from the cabin, their horses snorting and stamping in the cold morning air. Chaska stood on the porch, his rifle held loosely across his chest, his face unreadable. He'd sent the children to hide in the root cellar beneath the floorboards, a space he'd dug years ago for storing winter vegetables. It was cramped and dark, but it was hidden behind a false panel that no casual search would reveal. The first rider dismounted slowly, his movements deliberate. He was tall and thin, with a face like weathered leather and eyes that held no warmth. A silver badge glinted on his vest. U.S. Deputy Marshal. The second man stayed mounted, younger and heavier, with a shotgun resting across his saddle. His eyes swept the cabin, the barn, the surrounding trees with professional caution. "Morning," the marshal called out. His voice carried easily across the distance, flat and official. "Name's Cutler. This is Deputy Barnes. We're looking for 3 runaway children. 2 boys and a girl. Ages 4 to 10. You seen anyone matching that description?" Chaska's expression didn't change. "No." Cutler took a few steps closer, his hand resting on the gun at his hip. "You sure about that? We tracked them north from Silverton. Trail led straight through this valley. Plenty of valleys in these mountains. Trail could lead anywhere, not according to our tracker. He says they came this way. Says their prints stop about a mile south of here, near the creek crossing." Chaska shifted his weight slightly. "Creek washes out prints. Could have gone upstream, downstream, anywhere. Could have doubled back." Barnes spoke up from his horse, his voice rough. "Or they could be hiding in your cabin right now. They're not. You mind if we take a look?" Cutler asked. It wasn't really a question. "Yes, I mind. This is private property." "You got a warrant?" Cutler's jaw tightened. "Don't need a warrant for runaways. They're property of the Mercy Ridge Industrial School. Legal property. Hiding them is a crime. Good thing I'm not hiding anyone then." Barnes swung down from his horse, the shotgun now in his hands. "You know what I think? I think you're lying. I think those kids are in there right now, probably listening to every word we say." Chaska raised his rifle slightly, not quite pointing it at the men but making his intention clear. "I think you need to get back on your horses and ride out of here." Cutler's hand moved closer to his gun. "That's a mistake, friend. Threatening a federal officer is a serious crime. Trespassing on private land after being told to leave is also a crime. So I guess we're both criminals now." The tension stretched tight as a bowstring. Barnes's finger moved to the trigger of his shotgun. Cutler's hand hovered over his pistol. And Chaska stood perfectly still, his rifle ready, his eyes cold and calm. Then Cutler smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "All right. We'll leave. But we'll be back. With more men, with proper papers, with everything we need to search every inch of this property. And when we find those children, and we will find them, you're going to wish you'd cooperated today. I'll take my chances." Cutler mounted his horse, his movements sharp with anger. "You're making a big mistake. Edgar Voss doesn't forget people who cross him. And he has friends in very high places. Tell Voss I said he can go to hell." Barnes's face flushed red. "You arrogant son of a—" "Barnes," Cutler cut him off sharply. "Let's go. We've got work to do." The 2 men turned their horses and rode back down the valley, their pace unhurried but their backs rigid with fury. Chaska stood on the porch until they disappeared into the trees. then waited another 10 minutes, listening, watching, making sure they were truly gone. Finally, he went inside and pulled back the false panel in the floor. 3 pale faces looked up at him from the darkness. "They're gone," Chaska said quietly. Adam climbed out first, helping Kate and Max up behind him. All 3 were trembling, their faces streaked with tears. Kate was crying silently, her whole body shaking. Max's eyes had gone completely blank again, all the progress of the morning erased in minutes. And Adam looked like he might be sick. "They're coming back," Adam said, his voice hollow. "They're going to bring more men. They're going to tear this place apart. Let them." "You don't understand. When they come back, they won't ask permission. They'll just take us. And they'll arrest you for interfering. Everything you've built here, everything you have, they'll destroy it." Chaska knelt down so he was eye level with the boy. "Listen to me. I knew what I was risking when I told you to stay. I knew men would come. I knew there would be trouble. And I did it anyway. Why?" Adam's voice broke. "Why would you do that for us?" Chaska was quiet for a moment, searching for words that would make sense to a 10-year-old boy. "Because 8 years ago, I walked away from people who needed help. I told myself it wasn't my problem, that I'd done enough, that I deserved peace. And I've regretted it every day since. I won't make that mistake again." Kate wiped her eyes with her sleeve. "What do we do now? Now we prepare. They'll be back in 3, maybe 4 days. That gives us time to get ready." "Ready for what?" Adam asked. "For a fight." The rest of the day, Chaska worked with a purpose that bordered on fury. He moved supplies from the barn to the cabin, stacking bags of flour, beans, and dried meat in the corner. He filled every container he had with water from the creek. He cleaned and loaded every gun he owned: 2 rifles, a shotgun, and an old Colt revolver that had belonged to his father. He showed Adam how to bar the door from the inside and which window shutters were strongest. The children watched in silence, their eyes wide. This wasn't abstract anymore. This wasn't just talk of trouble coming. This was real preparation for real violence, and even at their young ages, they understood what it meant. As the sun began to set, Chaska called them to the table. He'd made stew from the elk meat, thick and rich, with wild onions and potatoes he'd stored in the cellar. They ate in silence, the weight of the coming storm heavy in the air. "I need to tell you something," Chaska said finally. "And I need you to listen carefully." All 3 children looked up, their spoons frozen halfway to their mouths. "When those men come back, things are going to happen fast. There might be shooting. There will definitely be yelling. And no matter what you hear, no matter what happens, you stay in that cellar. You don't come out. You don't make a sound. Not until I come for you. Understood? What if you don't come?" Adam's voice was barely a whisper. "Then you wait until full dark, and you run north. Follow the creek upstream for 3 miles until you reach a fork. Take the left branch. Another 2 miles, you'll find a cave with a red mark on the stone above the entrance. Inside there's supplies. Food, blankets, matches. Enough to last you a week. Wait there. Someone will come. Who will come, I don't know yet. But I'll make sure someone knows where to find you." Kate's voice trembled. "You're talking like you're going to die. I'm talking like a man who plans for every possibility. There's a difference." Adam set down his spoon, his hands shaking. "We should just leave, tonight, before they come back. We'll take our chances in the wilderness. At least then you won't get hurt. No, please. We can't let you do this. We can't let you throw your life away for us." Chaska reached across the table and gripped Adam's shoulder. "You're not letting me do anything. This is my choice. My land, my fight. And I'm asking you to trust that I know what I'm doing. But what if you're wrong? What if they kill you? Then they kill me. But they won't get you. That's what matters. Max suddenly stood up from the table and walked around to Chaska's chair. Without warning, the little boy climbed into his lap and wrapped his arms around Chaska's neck. It was the first voluntary touch he'd initiated since arriving, the first sign that something still lived inside his broken spirit. Chaska froze, unsure what to do. Then slowly, carefully, he wrapped his arms around the small body and held him. Max buried his face in Chaska's shoulder and began to cry. Not loud, dramatic sobs, but quiet, desperate sounds like something wounded trying not to be heard. Kate and Adam watched, their own tears falling silently. And Chaska sat there, holding this broken child, feeling the weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders like a physical thing. He'd made promises before. He'd failed to keep them. This time would be different. This time he wouldn't fail that night. Chaska barely slept. He sat by the window, watching the valley, listening to every sound. The children slept fitfully in the main room, their nightmares chasing them even here. Twice, Kate cried out in her sleep. Once, Adam sat bolt upright, his eyes wild. Before recognizing where he was and lying back down, around midnight, Chaska heard movement outside. He raised his rifle, his finger on the trigger, his breath steady. A shape moved through the darkness, low and four-legged. A wolf, probably, or a mountain lion checking the territory. Not men, not yet. As dawn approached, Chaska made a decision. He couldn't just wait for Cutler to return with reinforcements. He needed allies, information, leverage. And there was only one place he might find all three. When the children woke, he had breakfast ready. "I'm riding to town today," he said. "I'll be gone most of the day, maybe into the evening." Adam's face went white. "You're leaving us alone. You'll be safe. No one knows you're here except Cutler and Barnes, and they won't come back without more men. That'll take days. Where are you going?" "To see an old friend. Someone who might be able to help." "What kind of help?" "The legal kind. If we're going to fight this, we need more than guns. We need someone who knows the law, who can challenge Voss's claim on you." Kate's voice was small. "Do you really think that'll work?" "I don't know. But I have to try." Chaska gathered supplies for the ride, checking his rifle and pistol, filling his canteen. He showed Adam again where everything was: the food, the water, the weapons if the worst happened. He made them promise not to leave the cabin, not to answer the door for anyone, not to make any smoke from the chimney that might be seen from a distance. "If I'm not back by full dark," Chaska said, "you go to that cave I told you about. Don't wait for me. Just go. We won't leave you," Adam said stubbornly. "You will if I tell you to." "That's not a request." Adam wanted to argue. Chaska could see it in his eyes, but finally he nodded. "Be careful," the boy said quietly. Chaska mounted his horse, a sturdy buckskin mare he'd raised from a foal. He looked back at the cabin one more time, at the three small faces watching from the window, and felt something twist in his chest. In 2 days, these children had become his responsibility, his purpose, maybe even his family. And now he was leaving them alone to ride into uncertain danger, but he had no choice. If Voss had the law on his side, Chaska needed someone who could challenge that. Someone with knowledge, connections, and the courage to stand against corruption. And he knew exactly one person who fit that description. The ride to town took 4 hours through rough terrain. Chaska pushed the mare hard, stopping only once to let her drink from a stream. The town of Pine Ridge sat in a valley where 2 creeks met, a collection of rough buildings serving miners, loggers, and the occasional rancher. It wasn't much, but it had a general store, a saloon, a blacksmith, and most importantly, a lawyer. Samuel Pritchard had been the territorial prosecutor before a scandal involving a corrupt judge had forced him to resign. He'd moved to Pine Ridge 5 years ago and set up a small practice, mostly handling land disputes and mining claims. Chaska had met him during his years as a tracker, had worked with him on several cases. Pritchard was honest, brilliant, and stubborn as a mule. If anyone could find a legal way to protect the children, it was him. Chaska found Pritchard's office above the general store, a small room with one window and walls lined with law books. He knocked once and entered without waiting for an answer. Pritchard looked up from his desk, his reading glasses sliding down his nose. He was in his 50s, with gray hair and a lined face that spoke of too many late nights and too much whiskey. When he saw Chaska, his eyebrows rose. "Fireheart. Didn't expect to see you. Thought you died in those mountains. Not yet. Well, you look like hell. When's the last time you slept? 2 nights ago. Maybe 3. Samuel, I need your help." Something in Chaska's voice made Pritchard set down his pen. "What kind of help? The kind that might get you in trouble." Pritchard smiled grimly. "My favorite kind. Sit down and tell me everything." Chaska sat and told the story from the beginning. The children appearing at his cabin, their bruises and scars, the institution they'd fled from, the deputies who'd come looking for them. He left nothing out, knowing that Pritchard would need every detail to build a case. When he finished, Pritchard was quiet for a long time. Finally, he stood and walked to the window, staring out at the street below. "Edgar Vos," he said quietly. "I've heard of him. Everyone in the territory has. He runs that institution like his own private kingdom. Takes in orphans, works them half to death, and pockets the money the county pays for their care. There've been complaints before, but they always disappear. Voss has friends. Powerful friends. Can you help me or not?" Pritchard turned to face him. "I can try. But you need to understand what you're up against. Voss has legal custody of those children. In the eyes of the law, they belong to him until they reach majority age. Any judge in the territory will side with him. Then we find a judge who won't. There isn't one. Not in Nevada. Maybe in California, but that would take months, and you don't have months." Chaska's fists clenched. "So what do I do? Just hand them over?" "No, we fight. But we fight smart. First, I need to file a formal complaint against the institution. Allegations of abuse, neglect, unsafe conditions. That'll start an investigation. Second, I can petition for temporary guardianship on your behalf. It won't be easy, and there's no guarantee it'll work, but it might buy us time. How much time? A week. Maybe 2 if we're lucky, not enough. The deputies are coming back in days, not weeks." Pritchard nodded slowly. "Then we'll have to slow them down. I'll send a telegram to the Territorial Marshal's office in Carson City. Request a stay of enforcement pending investigation. It's a long shot, but it might work, and if it doesn't, then you'll have to make a choice. Surrender the children and fight through the courts, which could take years. Or refuse to cooperate and face arrest for obstruction. That's not a choice, I know. But it's the reality of the situation." Chaska stood and walked to the door, then paused. "Samuel, if something happens to me, if Voss or his men kill me or throw me in prison, promise me you'll keep fighting for those kids." Pritchard met his eyes. "You have my word. Thank you, Chaska. Be careful. Voss isn't just corrupt. He's dangerous. He's destroyed careers, ruined lives. Don't underestimate him." "I won't." Chaska left the office and walked back to his horse. The sun was past its peak now, starting its descent toward the western mountains. He needed to get back to the cabin, back to the children. Every minute he was gone was a minute they were vulnerable. He was mounting his horse when he heard a voice behind him. "Chaska Fireheart. Didn't think I'd see you again." Chaska turned. A man stood in the shadow of the general store, tall and lean with cold eyes and a star on his chest. Marshal Cutler. And beside him, 3 more men, all armed, all watching Chaska with expressions that promised violence. "Funny thing," Cutler said, stepping into the light.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story.
I was just about to ride back to your cabin. But here you are. Save me the trip. Chaska's hand moved toward his rifle, but 4 guns were already pointed at him. He froze. Where are the children, Fireheart? Cutler asked. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me. We know they're at your cabin. And now you're going to take us there. Nice and peaceful. Or we can do this the hard way, Chaska's mind raced. If he led them to the cabin, they'd find the children. But if he refused, they'd kill him right here in the street. And then they'd go to the cabin anyway. All right, Chaska said slowly. I'll take you there, Cutler smiled. Smart choice. Now drop your weapons. Slowly, Chaska unbuckled his gun belt and let it fall. One of the deputies picked it up, then took his rifle from the saddle holster. They bound his hands in front of him and put him back on his horse. Let's ride, Cutler said. And Fireheart? If you try anything at all, I'll put a bullet in your spine. Understood, Chaska nodded once. And as they rode out of town, he thought about Adam, Kate, and Max waiting in the cabin. Waiting for him to come back. Waiting for him to save them. He'd promised them he wouldn't fail. But as they rode toward the valley, surrounded by armed men, Chaska realized he might not be able to keep that promise after all. The ride back to the valley took nearly 5 hours with Chaska's hands bound and 4 armed men surrounding him. Marshal Cutler rode alongside, his eyes never leaving Chaska's face, watching for any sign of resistance or trickery. The other 3 deputies spread out in a loose formation, their rifles ready. Their faces hard with the certainty of men who believed they were doing righteous work. Chaska's mind worked furiously as they rode. The children would see them coming from a distance. If Adam kept his head, if he remembered everything Chaska had taught him that morning, he'd get Kate and Max into the cellar and bar the door from inside. But Adam was 10 years old, terrified, and probably convinced that Chaska had been killed or captured. Would he remember? Would he stay calm? Or would panic override everything? The sun was beginning its descent when they entered the valley. Cutler raised his hand, signaling the group to slow. How much farther? He asked. Another mile. Just past that ridge. Any other ways in or out? Creek bed to the west. Dane Trail to the north. But both are rough going on horseback. Cutler turned to one of his deputies. Harris, you and McKenna circle around, cover those approaches. If anyone tries to run, you stop them. Non-lethal if possible, but stop them. The 2 men nodded and peeled off, disappearing into the trees. Cutler continued forward with the remaining deputy, a thick-shouldered man named Davis, who kept one hand on his pistol and the other on his reins. As they crested the final rise, the cabin came into view. Smoke rose from the chimney, thin and barely visible against the darkening sky. The windows were shuttered, the door closed. Everything looked normal, peaceful, untrouched. But Chaska knew better. Somewhere beneath those floorboards, 3 children were hiding in darkness, listening to the approaching horses. Their hearts hammering with terror. Cozy little setup you got here, Cutler said, his voice dripping with false pleasantness. Must get lonely, though. All the way out here by yourself. Makes sense you'd taken some company. Even if that company belongs to someone else. Chaska said nothing. They rode into the yard, and Cutler dismounted, his gun drawn. Davis followed suit, positioning himself near the barn with a clear line of sight to the cabin door. Cutler approached the porch slowly, his eyes scanning every window, every shadow. Children. He called out, his voice loud and authoritative. This is U.S. Marshal Cutler. I'm here to take you back to Mercy Ridge. You're not in trouble. No one's going to hurt you. Just come out peaceful and we'll get this sorted. Silence. The wind moved through the pines, and somewhere in the distance, a hawk screamed. But from the cabin, nothing. Cutler's jaw tightened. He looked back at Chaska, still mounted with his hands bound. "Tell them to come out. They're not here. Don't lie to me, Fireheart. The smoke's fresh. Someone's inside, could be. But it's not them." Cutler's face darkened. He turned to Davis. "Check the barn." Davis moved quickly, rifle raised, disappearing into the shadowed interior of the barn. Chaska heard him moving around, checking stalls, climbing into the loft. After a few minutes, he emerged shaking his head. Nothing. Just some traps and pelts. Cutler climbed the porch steps and tried the door. Locked from inside. He pounded on it with his fist. "Open this door, now, or I'll break it down." Still nothing. Cutler stepped back and nodded to Davis, who raised his boot and kicked hard near the latch. The door shuddered but held. Another kick. The wood around the lock began to splinter. On the third kick, the bar inside cracked and the door flew open. Cutler entered first, his gun sweeping the room. Davis followed close behind. Chaska sat on his horse, listening, his whole body tense. He heard boots on the wooden floor, furniture being moved, a cupboard door slamming open. After what felt like an eternity, Cutler reappeared in the doorway. "Place is empty," he said, but his eyes were sharp with suspicion. "But someone's been here recently. Food on the table. Fire's still warm. And there's 3 sets of clothes on the floor that look about child-sized. Like I said, they're not here." Cutler descended the steps slowly, his gun now pointed directly at Chaska's chest. "Where are they? Gone. Ran when they saw you coming. Could be anywhere in these woods by now. You warned them somehow. Sent a signal. Didn't need to. They're smart kids. Smart enough to know what men with guns mean." Cutler's finger moved to the trigger. "I'm losing patience, Fireheart. Tell me where they are, or I swear I'll—" A gunshot cracked through the air, and Davis went down, clutching his leg and screaming. Everyone froze. The shot had come from the north, from the tree line. Cutler dove behind a water trough, and Chaska's horse reared, nearly throwing him. With his hands bound, he could barely hold on another shot. This one hit the ground near Cutler's position, kicking up dirt. Cutler returned fire blindly, 3 quick shots into the trees. "Harris, McKenna!" "We're under attack." More gunfire erupted from the west. The 2 deputies who'd circled around were shooting at something, or someone, in the forest. But Chaska couldn't see who or what they were shooting at. His horse bolted, running toward the barn, and he had just seconds to make a choice. He threw himself from the saddle, hitting the ground hard, his shoulder exploding with pain. His hands were still bound, but he scrambled to his feet and ran for the cabin. Bullets whined through the air around him. Cutler shouted something, but the words were lost in the chaos. Chaska crashed through the broken door and slammed it shut behind him. His hands. He needed to free his hands. He spotted a knife on the table, grabbed it awkwardly, and began sawing at the rope. The blade was sharp, and within seconds, the rope parted. He flexed his fingers, feeling blood return to them. Outside, the shooting continued. Cutler was yelling orders. Davis was still screaming. And somewhere in the forest, whoever had fired those first shots was keeping the deputies pinned down. But who? Chaska hadn't told anyone about the children except Pritchard, and the lawyer had been in his office when Chaska left movement at the edge of his vision. Chaska spun, knife raised, and froze. The false panel in the floor was open. Adam stood there, pale and shaking, holding Chaska's old revolver in both hands. Behind him, Kate clutched Max, her eyes huge with terror. "Adam," Chaska breathed. "What did you do?" "I shot at them," the boy said, his voice trembling. "I heard them coming, heard what they said, and I knew they'd find us if we just hid. So I took the rifle you showed me, and I went out through the back window, and I shot at them." "That was you firing from the trees," Adam nodded. "I didn't hit anyone. I'm not a good shot." But I thought if they were busy shooting back, maybe you could get away. Chaska felt something break and reform in his chest. This 10-year-old boy, who'd spent months being beaten and terrorized, had risked everything to save him. Had walked into gunfire to give him a chance. The courage it must have taken, the sheer desperate love. "Get back in the cellar," Chaska said urgently. "All of you. Right now, but now Adam, this isn't over. They're going to come through that door any second, and when they do, I need you hidden." Go. Adam hesitated one more second, then nodded. He helped Kate and Max back down into the cellar, then pulled the panel closed from inside. Chaska heard the soft click of the latch, then silence. He moved to the window and peered out through a crack in the shutter. Cutler was still behind the water trough, but he was gesturing to Harris and McKenna, who'd emerged from the trees and were moving toward the cabin in a crouch. Davis had dragged himself behind the barn, leaving a trail of blood in the dirt. The shooting had stopped, but the tension was worse than gunfire. "Fireheart," Cutler shouted. "I know you're in there. And I know those children are with you. This is your last chance. Send them out, or we're coming in. And if we have to come in, people are going to get hurt." Chaska said nothing. He was calculating distances, angles, odds. 3 men still able to fight, all armed, all trained. Him with a knife and a revolver with maybe 5 rounds. Not good odds. But he'd fought worse. "All right," Cutler called. "Have it your way." Harris reached the porch first, moving fast and low. McKenna covered him from the yard. Chaska let Harris get 2 steps inside before he moved. He came from the side, driving the knife toward Harris's gun hand. The blade connected, and Harris screamed, dropping his rifle. Chaska grabbed it, reversed it, and slammed the stock into Harris's temple. The deputy went down hard. McKenna fired through the open door. The bullet punched through the wall 6 inches from Chaska's head. He returned fire with the rifle, 3 quick shots that sent McKenna diving for cover. Then he heard boots on the porch. Cutler was coming. The marshal came through the door fast, his gun already firing. Chaska felt something hot slash across his ribs, a bullet that had come within an inch of killing him. He threw himself behind the table, flipped it on its side for cover, and fired back. The rifle clicked empty. Cutler advanced, his face a mask of cold fury. "End of the line, Fireheart." "Drop the gun." Chaska reached for his father's revolver, still tucked in his belt. His fingers closed around the grip. But before he could draw, Cutler fired. The bullet hit the revolver, sent it spinning across the floor. Chaska's hand went numb. "I said drop it," Cutler repeated, now standing over him. His gun pointed at Chaska's head. This was it. This was how it ended. Chaska had fought as hard as he could, but it wasn't enough. He'd failed those children after all. They'd watch him die, hear the gunshot, know that the man who'd promised to protect them had fallen. Then a voice cut through the moment, clear and commanding. "Put the gun down, Marshal. Or I'll put you down." Everyone froze. A man stood in the doorway, tall and straight, wearing a long coat and a badge that caught the last light of day. Behind him, 3 more men, all armed, all pointing their weapons at Cutler. "Territorial Marshal Briggs," the man said. "Carson City jurisdiction. And you, Marshal Cutler, are under arrest." Cutler's face went white. "What? On what charge? Corruption, conspiracy, unlawful seizure." "Take your pick. Mr. Pritchard sent a very detailed telegram this afternoon. Seems Edgar Voss's operation has been under investigation for months, and you've been taking payments to look the other way. We've got receipts, witnesses, everything we need. That's a lie. Then you can explain it to a judge. Lower your weapon." Now, for a long moment, Cutler didn't move. His gun stayed pointed at Chaska's head, his finger on the trigger. Then slowly, reluctantly, he lowered it. One of Briggs's men moved in and took it, then cuffed Cutler's hands behind his back, Briggs stepped into the cabin and looked down at Chaska. "You must be Fireheart. Pritchard said you'd be in trouble." Looks like he was right. Chaska pushed himself up, wincing as his ribs protested. "The children are safe. For now. We'll need to sort out the legal details, but Edgar Voss is being arrested as we speak. His institution is being shut down. Every child there is being relocated to legitimate facilities. And these three, that depends. Pritchard filed an emergency petition for guardianship on your behalf. Normally, it wouldn't stand a chance. But given the circumstances, given what we've uncovered about Voss's operation, I think a judge might be willing to grant temporary custody while we investigate. You interested in taking on that responsibility?" Chaska looked at the false panel in the floor, knowing 3 children were hiding beneath it, listening to every word. "Yes," he said simply. Briggs nodded. "Then we'll start the paperwork. But understand, this isn't permanent. Not yet. There will be hearings, investigations, home visits. The court will want to make sure you're suitable, that you can provide for them, keep them safe, give them what they need. I understand. All right then. Let's get those children out of hiding and—" The panel slid open before Briggs could finish. Adam climbed out first, his face streaked with tears, but his jaw set with determination. Kate followed, still holding Max's hand. And Max, silent Max, looked up at Chaska with eyes that were no longer quite so empty. Adam walked straight to Chaska and wrapped his arms around him. Kate and Max followed, and suddenly Chaska was surrounded by 3 children who were holding him like he was the only solid thing in a world of chaos. He stood there, his ribs screaming, his hand throbbing, blood seeping through his shirt, and felt more whole than he had in 8 years. "It's over," he said quietly. "You're safe now, promise?" Adam whispered, "Promise." Briggs watched this scene with something that might have been approval. "Well," he said, "looks like you've already started building a family, Fireheart. Let's make sure the law recognizes it." Outside, Cutler and his men were being loaded onto horses, hands bound, faces dark with rage and humiliation. Davis was being tended to by one of Briggs's deputies, his leg wound wrapped and bandaged. The valley was quiet again, peaceful, as if the violence of the past hour had been nothing but a bad dream. But it wasn't a dream. It was real, and it had changed everything. 3 children who'd come to Chaska's door asking for one night of rest had found instead a home, a protector, a future. And a man who'd spent 8 years running from responsibility had found a reason to stand and fight. As night fell over the valley, Chaska sat with the children in front of the fire, his arm around Adam, Kate leaning against his side. Max curled up in his lap. Briggs and his men had made camp outside, giving them space, giving them time to process what had happened. What happens now? Kate asked quietly. "Now we wait," Chaska said, "for the judge to make a decision, for the paperwork to go through, for everything to become official, and if the judge says no." Adam asked. Chaska looked down at the boy. "Then we figure something else out. But I'm not giving up on you. Any of you. That's a promise." Max shifted in his lap and did something he hadn't done in months. He spoke. His voice was barely a whisper, rough from disuse, but the words were clear. "Thank you," he said, "for fighting for us." Chaska's throat tightened. He pulled the boy closer. "You don't have to thank me. You're family now. And family fights for each other." Kate smiled through her tears. "Family," she repeated, like she was testing out the word. "I like that. Me too," Adam said. They sat there in the firelight, 4 people who'd found each other in the darkness, who'd chosen each other when the world had tried to tear them apart. Outside, the mountain stood silent and eternal, witnesses to a promise made and kept, to a battle fought and won, to a family forged in the crucible of violence and fear and desperate, defiant love, and for the first time in 8 years, Chaska Fireheart felt like he'd finally come home. 3 months passed like water flowing over stones, each day reshaping the landscape of their lives in ways both subtle and profound. Winter had come to the Sierra Nevada in full force, blanketing the valley in snow that reached halfway up the cabin walls and turned the world into something clean and impossibly white. The creek froze solid except for one small section where the current ran too fast to capture, and the mountains became impassable fortresses that kept the outside world at bay. Chaska stood at the window watching Adam and Kate build a snow fort in the clearing behind the cabin. Their laughter carried through the cold air, bright and genuine, the kind of sound that belonged to children who'd forgotten what it felt like to be afraid. Adam was teaching Kate how to pack the snow properly, showing her the technique Chaska had taught him weeks ago. She listened intently, her face serious with concentration, then broke into giggles when her snowball fell apart in her hands. Max sat at the table behind Chaska, carefully drawing in a journal that Pritchard had brought on his last visit. The boy's tongue stuck out slightly as he worked, his whole body focused on getting the lines just right. He'd been talking more each week, slowly finding his voice again, though he still went quiet when strangers came around. But here, in the cabin with his family, he chattered constantly, making up stories about the animals he saw in the forest and asking questions about everything. The legal proceedings had taken longer than anyone expected. Judge Morrison had ordered 3 separate home visits, sending investigators to assess whether a single Pute man living alone in the mountains was suitable to raise 3 white children. The first investigator had been skeptical, his report filled with concerns about isolation, cultural differences, and Chaska's lack of formal education. The second had been more fair-minded, noting the children's improved health and obvious attachment to their guardian. The third had barely made it through the interview before Kate had asked him why he was trying to take them away from their home. In the end, it was the children themselves who'd swayed the judge. At the final hearing in Carson City, Adam had stood before the bench and spoken with a clarity that belied his 10 years. He'd described the months at Mercy Ridge, the beatings and starvation, the nights spent terrified in the dark. Then he'd described the 3 months with Chaska, learning to hunt and trap, studying from the books Pritchard brought, sitting by the fire while Chaska told stories about Paiute traditions and the ways of the mountain. The difference, Adam had said, was the difference between existing and living. Judge Morrison had granted permanent custody 2 weeks ago. The papers had arrived yesterday, official and binding, declaring that Adam, Kate, and Max were now legally the wards of Chaska Fireheart until they reached majority age. Pritchard had ridden out through the snow to deliver them personally, staying for dinner and leaving with a promise to return in spring. Chaska? Max's voice pulled him from his thoughts. Can you help me with this? Chaska turned from the window and walked to the table. Max had been drawing the cabin, capturing it with surprising accuracy considering he was only 4. But he'd gotten stuck on the chimney, unsure how to make it look 3-dimensional. Like this, Chaska said, taking the pencil and adding a few quick lines. See how the shadow falls? That's what makes it look real. Max studied the addition carefully, then nodded. I see it now. Thank you, Chaska ruffled his hair. You're getting good at this. Maybe you'll be an artist someday. Maybe, Max said thoughtfully. Or maybe a hunter like you. Or both. Both sounds good. The door burst open in a flurry of snow and cold air. Adam and Kate tumbled inside, their faces red from the cold, their eyes bright with exertion. Chaska, you have to come see the fort, Kate said breathlessly. It's huge. We made it big enough for all of us to fit inside. After you warm up, Chaska said. Sit by the fire. I'll make hot cider. They peeled off their wet outer layers and crowded around the hearth, holding their hands toward the flames. Chaska hung a pot over the fire and added cider, cinnamon sticks, and cloves. The smell filled the cabin, spicy and sweet. Tell us a story, Adam said as they waited for the cider to heat. Tell us about the time you tracked the bear through the canyon. Chaska had told this story a dozen times already, but the children never tired of it. He settled into his chair and began, watching their faces as they listened, seeing them hang on every word. This was what family looked like, he realized. Not blood or law, but this. Shared moments, repeated stories. The comfortable rhythm of people who belong together after the story and the cider. After Kate and Max had been sent to their beds in the loft Chaska had built last month, Adam lingered by the fire. He'd been doing this more often lately, finding excuses to stay up after the others slept, seeking out these quiet moments alone with Chaska. "Something on your mind?" Chaska asked. Adam stared into the flames. "I've been thinking about before. About our parents. About what happened." Chaska waited, knowing the boy needed to work through this at his own pace. "I don't remember them as well as I used to," Adam continued, his voice small. "Their faces are getting fuzzy. Sometimes I try to remember my mother's voice, and I can't. And that scares me." "That's normal," Chaska said quietly. "Memory fades. It doesn't mean you love them any less, but I don't want to forget them. They were good people. They deserved better than typhoid. We deserved better than what happened after. You did. And they did. But life isn't about what we deserve. It's about what we do with what we're given." Adam looked up. "Is that a Paiute saying?" "No, just something I figured out the hard way." The boy was quiet for a moment. "Do you think they'd be okay with this? With you raising us? With us calling this place home?" Chaska considered the question carefully. "I think your parents would want you to be safe, fed, loved, and given a chance to grow into the people you're meant to be. If I'm doing that, then yes, I think they'd be okay with it." "You are," Adam said firmly. "You're doing all of that. Then that's your answer." Adam stood and walked to where Chaska sat. He wrapped his arms around the man's shoulders in a quick, fierce hug. "I'm glad we knocked on your door that night. I'm glad you didn't turn us away." "Me too," Chaska said, returning the embrace. When Adam had gone to bed, Chaska sat alone by the fire, thinking about the path that had led him here. 8 years ago, he'd come to these mountains to escape, to hide from failure and grief and the weight of responsibilities he'd been unable to carry. He'd built a life of solitude, convincing himself that isolation was the same as peace. But 3 children had appeared on his doorstep asking for one night of shelter, and everything had changed. They'd given him back something he thought he'd lost forever. Purpose, connection, a reason to wake up each morning and face the world. They'd needed him, yes, but he'd needed them just as much. The winter passed slowly, each day blending into the next in a rhythm that felt almost timeless. Chaska taught the children everything he knew. How to read animal tracks in the snow. How to set snares and check trap lines. How to identify which plants were edible and which were poison. How to navigate by the stars and predict weather by the behavior of birds. But he also taught them to read and write, using the books Pritchard brought and making them practice their letters every evening. Kate proved to be a natural scholar, devouring stories and asking questions that sometimes stumped even Chaska. Adam excelled at practical skills, his hands quick and sure with tools and traps. And Max, quiet Max, seemed to absorb everything without effort, his mind sharp and curious. They celebrated Christmas with a small pine tree that Adam and Kate had cut and dragged back to the cabin. Chaska carved simple wooden toys, a horse for Max, a doll for Kate, a knife with Adam's name etched into the handle. The children had made gifts too. Max had drawn portraits of each of them. Kate had sewn patches onto Chaska's worn coat. And Adam had spent weeks secretly carving a pipe from juniper wood. The bowl decorated with intricate patterns. On Christmas morning, as they exchanged gifts by the fire, Chaska felt something he hadn't felt in years, contentment. Not the absence of pain or the numbness of isolation, but genuine, full-hearted contentment. These children had given him a gift worth more than anything that could be wrapped or carved. They'd given him a family January brought the deepest snows, Drifts piled higher than the windows, and for 2 weeks they were completely snowed in, unable to even reach the barn. But they had plenty of supplies, and the cabin stayed warm. They spent the long evenings telling stories, playing games with stones and sticks, and teaching each other songs. Kate taught them a lullaby their mother used to sing. Chaska taught them Paiute hunting songs. Adam made up ridiculous rhymes that had Max laughing until he couldn't breathe. February brought the first signs of spring. The days grew longer, the sun stronger. Icicles dripped from the eaves, and the snow began to compact and settle. Chaska started preparing for the spring hunt, checking his equipment and making plans. The children would come with him this year, he decided. They were ready. They'd learned enough to be helpful rather than hindrance. But before spring could truly arrive, before the snow had fully melted, riders appeared in the valley. Chaska saw them from a distance, 3 men on horseback picking their way carefully through the remaining drifts. His hand moved instinctively toward his rifle, old instincts flaring. But as they drew closer, he recognized the lead rider, Marshal Briggs. And he wasn't alone. Behind him rode Samuel Pritchard and another man Chaska didn't recognize, older and well-dressed despite the rough terrain. "Company," Chaska called into the cabin. The children appeared at his side immediately, their faces alert but not afraid. They'd learned to trust Chaska's judgment. If he wasn't worried, they wouldn't be either. The riders reached the cabin and dismounted. Briggs raised a hand in greeting. "Fireheart. Hope we're not intruding. Depends on why you're here." "Good news," Pritchard said, his breath misting in the cold air. "Very good news, actually." The older man stepped forward. He had kind eyes and a gentle manner that put the children somewhat at ease. "Mr. Fireheart, my name is Jonathan Wesley. I'm the new Territorial Superintendent of Child Welfare. I've taken over oversight of all orphanages and institutions in Nevada." Chaska's jaw tightened. "If you're here to take them back, quite the opposite," Wesley said quickly. "I'm here to thank you. Your actions and Mr. Pritchard's investigation exposed a network of corruption and abuse that had been operating for years. Edgar Vos is in prison. 3 other institutions have been shut down. 67 children have been relocated to proper facilities or placed with families. You saved more than just these 3. Chaska didn't know what to say to that. He'd never thought of it in those terms. He'd just been trying to protect the 3 children who'd knocked on his door. "But that's not the only reason I'm here," Wesley continued. He pulled a folder from his saddlebag and handed it to Chaska. "This is a formal certification from the territorial government. It recognizes you as an approved guardian and foster parent, which means, if you're willing, you could take in other children. Children who need homes but don't have anywhere else to go." Chaska stared at the papers in his hands. "You want me to become a foster parent? We need good people, Mr. Fireheart. People who actually care about children rather than seeing them as free labor or sources of income. You've proven you're one of those people. And from what I understand, you have the space, the skills, and clearly the heart for it." Chaska looked at Adam, Kate, and Max. They were watching him with wide eyes, waiting to see what he'd say. "What do you 3 think?" he asked. Adam spoke first. "Would they be like us? Would they become part of the family? If they needed a home, yes," Wesley said. Kate's face lit up. "I think we should do it. I think we should help them." Max nodded vigorously. "More family is good." Chaska felt something expand in his chest. These children, who'd been through so much, who'd fought so hard to stay together, were ready to open their home to others. Ready to share what they'd found. The generosity of it, the pure-hearted kindness, humbled him. "All right," Chaska said. "I'll do it, but on my terms. No one gets placed here without my approval. No one who doesn't truly need it. And I won't. Take more that I can properly care for." "Completely reasonable," Wesley said, smiling. "I wouldn't have it any other way. They spent the rest of the day discussing logistics, paperwork, and procedures. Briggs and Pritchard stayed for dinner, filling the cabin with conversation and laughter. The children peppered them with questions. About the outside world, about the other children who'd been rescued, about what had happened to the men who'd hurt them. Vos got 15 years, Briggs said. Cutler got 10. The others got various sentences. They won't be hurting anyone for a long time. Good, Adam said firmly. They deserved worse, maybe, Briggs said. But justice isn't about what people deserve. It's about making sure. They can't hurt anyone else. As the visitors prepared to leave, Wesley pulled Chaska aside. I meant what I said earlier. What you did was remarkable. You gave those children their lives back. Not many people would have taken that risk. I didn't do it to be remarkable. I did it because it was right. That's what makes it remarkable, Wesley said. Thank you, Mr. Fireheart, for being the kind of man who does the right thing even when it costs him. After they'd gone, after the children were in bed and the cabin was quiet again, Chaska sat by the fire and thought about the future. He'd come to these mountains seeking isolation, seeking escape from a world that had taken everything from him. But life, it seemed, had other plans. 3 children had knocked on his door asking for shelter, and in giving it to them, he'd found his way back to himself. He'd found purpose and family, and a reason to face each day with something other than resignation. And now, somehow, his small cabin in the mountains had become a sanctuary for others. A place where broken children could come to heal. A place where families could be built from nothing but need and love and stubborn determination. The next. Morning dawned clear and cold, the sky so blue it hurt to look at. Chaska woke the children early and took them outside. The snow had a frozen crust that held their weight, and they walked across it to the ridge overlooking the valley. Look, Chaska said, pointing to the east where the sun was rising. Spring's coming. In a few weeks the snow will melt, the creeks will run high, the meadows will turn green, and everything will start fresh. Are you talking about the seasons or about us? Adam asked quietly. Both, Chaska said. Kate took his hand. I'm glad we found you. I'm glad you didn't turn us away. I'm glad too, Max, standing on Chaska's other side, reached up and took his hand as well. They stood there together, 4 people who'd become a family against all odds, watching. The sun climbed higher and turned the snow to gold. Adam moved closer, completing the circle. Do you think we'll remember this moment? When we're grown and gone? Yes, Chaska said with absolute certainty. We'll remember, and they would. Years later, when Adam had become a territorial ranger, when Kate had opened a school for orphans, when Max had become an artist whose paintings hung in galleries from San Francisco to New York, they would all remember this morning. Standing on a mountain ridge, watching the sunrise, their hands linked, their hearts full. They would remember the night they'd knocked on a stranger's door, asking for shelter. They would remember the man who'd given them not just a night, but a lifetime. They would remember the moment 4 lost souls had found each other and become whole. But that was all in the future. For now, they were simply a family standing in the snow, watching spring approach, ready to face whatever came next. Together, as they walked back to the cabin, Max tugged on Chaska's sleeve. Can we have pancakes for breakfast, if you help make them? Deal, Max said happily. Kate skipped ahead, already planning what she'd do when the weather warmed. Adam walked beside Chaska, matching his stride, learning without words how to move through the world with confidence and purpose. And Chaska felt, perhaps for the first time in his entire life, that he was exactly where he was meant to be. The cabin came into view, smoke rising from the chimney, welcoming them home. And Chaska thought about the question that had started everything. Can we rest here tonight? 3 frightened children had asked him for one night of safety, and he'd given them forever. But they'd given him forever, too. They'd given him back his life, his purpose, his heart. They'd taken a man who'd been slowly disappearing into the wilderness and made him whole again. They'd shown him that family wasn't about blood or law or anything except choice. The choice to care, the choice to protect, the choice to love even. When it was hard, even when it was scary, even when it meant risking everything. As they entered the cabin and began preparing breakfast, as Max measured flour and Kate cracked eggs and Adam stirred the batter, Chaska stood back and watched. Them. His children, his family. The greatest gift he'd never known he needed. Chaska, Kate called. You're staring. Are you okay? I'm perfect, he said. And for the first time in 8 years, it was true. Outside, spring was coming. Inside, a family was growing. And somewhere in the mountains, other lost children would eventually find their way to this door, to this man, to this place where broken things were mended and lonely hearts found homes. But that was tomorrow's story. Today was for pancakes, and laughter, and the quiet joy of being exactly where you belonged. Today was for family. Today was for love. Today was enough. And as the morning sun filled the cabin with golden light, Chaska Fireheart smiled and thought about the night 3 children had changed his life with a simple question. Can we rest here tonight? The answer had been yes. The answer would always be yes. 2 years had passed since that winter morning when Chaska had stood with 3 children on a mountain ridge watching spring approach. The cabin had changed in that time, expanded with a new wing that housed 2 additional bedrooms and a larger common room where everyone could gather. The barn had been rebuilt and reinforced, now holding 4 horses instead of 1, and the surrounding land showed signs of careful cultivation with a vegetable garden, a chicken coop housing 24 hens, and a smokehouse that Chaska and Adam had constructed together. It was late summer now. The mountains dressed in green and gold, the air warm and filled with the drone of insects and the call of birds. Chaska stood in the garden pulling weeds while keeping one eye on the children scattered across the property. Adam, now 12 and already showing signs of the man he would become, was at the creek teaching 2 younger boys how to fish. His voice carried across the distance, patient and instructive. Kate, 9 now and growing tall, sat under a pine tree reading to 3 little girls who'd arrived 6 months ago from a failed orphanage in California. And Max, 6 years old and no longer silent, was in the barn helping a new arrival named Thomas learn how to properly groom the horses. The family had grown significantly. In 2 years, Chaska had taken in 7 more children, each one broken in their own way. Each one needing what he and his original 3 could provide: safety, structure, belonging, love. The territorial government sent him a small stipend for each child, barely enough to cover food and clothes. But Chaska made it work through hunting, trapping, and the sale of furs and medicinal herbs he gathered from the mountains. A rider appeared on the eastern trail, and Chaska straightened, wiping his hands on his trousers. He recognized the horse before he recognized the rider. Samuel Pritchard, making his monthly visit to check on the children and deliver mail. The lawyer had become a fixture in their lives, a bridge between the isolated mountain sanctuary and the legal world that still held power over their fate. Pritchard dismounted and tied his horse to the post near the cabin. He looked tired, his face lined with stress, but when he saw Chaska, he smiled warmly. "Looks like you're running a small village here now," Pritchard said, gesturing to the children scattered across the property. "Feels like it sometimes," Chaska admitted. "How was the road? Dry, hot, dusty, the usual August misery." "But I brought good news. The territorial legislature approved additional funding for foster families. You'll be receiving 3 times what you're getting now. It's still not much, but it should make things considerably easier. That will help tremendously. Winter supplies are expensive with this many mouths to feed. There's more," Pritchard continued, pulling several letters from his saddlebag. "Judge Morrison sent a personal note. He wanted you to know that your work here is being noticed. There's talk of using your operation as a model for other foster situations across the territory. Before Chaska could respond, Adam appeared from the direction of the creek, 2 younger boys trailing behind him, all 3 carrying impressive strings of trout. He stopped when he saw Pritchard, his face lighting up. "Mr. Pritchard, did you bring more books?" "I did indeed," Pritchard said, pulling a wrapped package from his saddlebag. "History of the Roman Empire, a collection of Edgar Allan Poe's stories, and a mathematics primer that should challenge even your considerable skills." Adam took the package reverently. "Thank you so much. I finished the last ones you brought. The Shakespeare was incredible, and the astronomy book taught me how to navigate by the stars. All of them? It's only been a month. I read every evening after the younger ones go to sleep. When the stories are good, I can't put them down." Pritchard laughed heartily. "You're going to end up teaching me before long." "How's the fishing today?" "Excellent. We caught enough for dinner for everyone, with some left over for smoking. Daniel and Marcus are getting much better at reading the water." The 2 younger boys beamed with pride. Daniel, 8, had come from a workhouse in Sacramento. Marcus, 7, had been found wandering alone after his family had died in a house fire. Both had been withdrawn and frightened when they'd first arrived, but Adam had taken them under his wing. Teaching them the skills Chaska had taught him, Kate emerged from under the tree, her 3 charges following like devoted ducklings. "Mr. Pritchard, will you stay for dinner? We're having fresh fish and the bread I baked this morning, and the last of the berry preserves. I'd be absolutely delighted." "Miss Kate." Max came running from the barn, Thomas close behind, both boys flushed with excitement. "Mr. Pritchard, you have to come see what Thomas and I built. We made a proper tack room with hooks for all the saddles, and everything's organized now, and Chaska said it was professional quality work." "I'd love to see it," Pritchard said warmly, allowing himself to be dragged toward the barn by the 2 excited boys. After admiring the tack room and praising Thomas's carpentry skills, Pritchard walked with Chaska back toward the cabin. The children scattered to their various tasks with practiced efficiency. Adam supervised the younger ones in cleaning the fish. Kate organized the little girls to set the table. Max and Thomas returned to the barn to complete their chores. "You've done something truly remarkable here, Chaska," Pritchard said quietly. "These children aren't just surviving. They're thriving in ways I've rarely seen. I've visited orphanages with 50 staff members that don't achieve half of what you've accomplished. I'm just giving them what they need. What every child needs. A place to belong, work that matters, people who care about them. It's significantly more than that. You're teaching them practical skills, moral values, how to care for each other. Adam's becoming a natural leader. Kate's turning into a genuine scholar. Max has completely overcome his trauma. You're not just sheltering them temporarily. You're genuinely raising them to be capable adults." Dinner that night was controlled chaos in the best possible way. 12 people crowded around the expanded table that Chaska had built specifically to accommodate their growing family. They passed plates of perfectly cooked fish and fresh bread and roasted vegetables, talking over each other in the comfortable way of people who belong together, laughing at jokes, debating whose turn it was to wash dishes. Pritchard sat at one end, Chaska at the other, and between them stretched a family that had been assembled from broken pieces, but had somehow become whole after the meal. After the dishes were washed and the younger children were tucked into their beds with stories and goodnight kisses, Adam, Kate, and Max sat with Chaska and Pritchard on the front porch. The night was clear and warm, the stars impossibly bright overhead, and the sound of crickets filled the mountain air. "Mr. Pritchard," Adam said thoughtfully, "do you think we'll always be able to stay here?" "All of us together. I can't promise forever, Adam. Life has a way of changing. Some of the younger ones might have relatives who come looking for them, or they might choose different paths when they're older. But as long as Chaska wants to continue this work, and as long as the territory supports it, then yes, this place will be here. This home will endure. Good, Adam said with quiet conviction. Because this is home. Not just for me and Kate and Max, but for all of them. They need to know that home is permanent. Kate leaned against Chaska's shoulder. Do you ever regret it? Taking in so many of us. Chaska put his arm around her. Never, not once. Not even on the hardest days when everything seems to go wrong. Max, sitting at Chaska's feet, looked up with eyes that were now clear and bright and full of life. I'm glad we came here that night. I'm glad you didn't turn us away. I'm glad we're a family now. Me too, Chaska said simply. Pritchard stood to leave, preparing for the long ride back to town. As he mounted his horse, he looked back at the cabin, at the 4 figures on the porch. You know, Chaska, I've spent my entire career fighting for justice in courtrooms. Writing legal briefs, arguing before judges, trying to change the world through law. But what you're doing here, this is real justice. This is what it actually looks like when someone makes a genuine difference. After Pritchard rode away, the 4 of them sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the mountains. Inside, 8 children slept safely in warm beds, their bellies full, their futures no longer hopeless. Chaska, Adam said quietly. Do you remember what I asked you that first morning? Whether you'd come for us if they took us away. I remember every word. You kept that promise. You fought for us. You risked everything. And now you're doing the same thing for the others. I need to understand why. Chaska thought about the question. About all the years of running and hiding and trying to escape from responsibility. He thought about the night 3 frightened children had appeared on his porch and changed everything. Because someone has to, he said finally. Because these children deserve better than what the world gave them. Because I know what it's like to lose everything and have no one to catch you when you fall. And because you 3 showed me that the best way to heal your own broken heart is to help mend someone else's. Kate squeezed his hand gently. Max leaned against his leg with complete trust. Adam nodded slowly, understanding more than most 12-year-olds ever would. Together, they sat under the infinite stars. A family born from desperation and forged in love. Living proof that sometimes the most broken things can be mended into something stronger than they ever were before. Time for bed, Chaska said eventually. Tomorrow we start building the new schoolroom. Kate, you'll help me teach the younger ones their letters, really? Kate's face glowed with excitement. Really? You're ready for that responsibility. When they finally went inside, when the lamps were extinguished one by one and the cabin settled into nighttime quiet, Chaska made his final rounds. He checked on each sleeping child, pulled blankets up over small shoulders, stood for a moment in each doorway watching them breathe peacefully. His children, his family, his purpose, and when he finally lay down in his own bed, Chaska Fireheart closed his eyes and smiled. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new problems to solve, possibly new children who needed saving. But tonight, everything was exactly as it should be. Tonight, he was home. The last thought he had before sleep claimed him was one of profound gratitude. Thank you for 3 brave children who asked for one night and gave me forever. Thank you for showing me that love isn't something you lose. It's something you build one child one day. One choice at a time and in the darkness. Surrounded by the breathing of 10 sleeping children and the eternal silence of the mountains. Chaska Fireheart finally found the peace he'd been searching for all along.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.